forms and disclosure forms in PRDS. So let's go to the PRDS form. To access PRDS forms, you can either go to Silva or simply type in PRDS. If I go to Silva, you see this PRDS forms? I click that, okay? And then it requires that I log in. Okay. And I am in PRDS. Now, some of you that are in Southern California, you are wondering, well, we're never going to use PRDS, and why are we learning PRDS? Well, to that I say never. We just have to use PRDS forms. Because at Centermac, we actually cover the entire California. Sometimes you may have a client in San Diego who's interested in buying a property in, let's say, Silicon Valley or San Jose. And part of San Jose and part of San Mateo, people actually still use, not still, but they may insist that you use the PRDS form. So it's important to learn these forms. You know, in real estate, the more knowledge you have, the more confident you're going to appear in front of your customers. So having more knowledge means that you're going to gain more confidence as an agent, which is why you learn different things. So PRDS forms is just a type of form that you could be using, so we need to talk about it. Plus, as we are going through the forms, you're actually learning, gaining more knowledge in certain neighborhood as a real estate agent. Now, for example, today we're going to talk about the PRDS form. It's an advisory form. Now, the difference between advisory form and disclosure is advisory is not required by law. It's something that is recommended. It's something that agents use to limit their liability, because sometimes you're required to give a certain advice to your customer. Wouldn't it be easier if they create forms for you to use as advisory, so you don't have to verbally tell your customer certain advice? And say, for example, in the peninsula, we have this advisory form, and it's called the PRDS San Mateo Santa Clara County's advisory. Things that are unique to San Mateo and Santa Clara County. And let's look at some of this. We'll look at the things that are unique to the Bay Area. They talk about existing housing stock. Many properties in this area have been developed at different times under different building codes. They may not be able to accommodate current or future personal, or they may not be able to accommodate current or future personal property items, including but not limited to electric cars. Regardless of its age, the property should be inspected by a competent property inspector, and buyers should obtain all additional inspections recommended by any inspector, or as buyer may deem necessary for determining the actual condition of the property. Property components, appliances, fixtures, systems, and materials may have varying degrees of remaining useful life and could fail without notice. Not all aspects of the property may comply with the current code, zoning, health, and safety. This is just generally talking about things that may not be permitted or things that may not be built according to the code. Okay, so I mean, they talk about things like the Chinese drywall. If you don't know what Chinese drywall is, let me tell you the story about Chinese drywall. Who knows what Chinese drywall is about? That's right. So yeah, there's one time there was some Chinese drywall that was shipped from China to the United States, and this drywall were installed in several eastern states. Very few in California, but mostly in eastern states. Now, they are defective drywall. If they come in contact with moisture, they will give out certain gas, okay, that smells. And this gas not only smells, but this gas can actually corrode your plumbing. So, you know, this is just an advisory that talks about things that are not perfect, okay, existing housing stock. Now, I think it's an advisory that they put in to alert the consumer about past problems with property involving different types of building materials. Okay, so that's what Chinese drywall is about. Okay. Now here you have something else called deferred maintenance. You know what deferred maintenance means? It means that the homeowner has lived there for many, many years, and he doesn't maintain his property. If you have a homeowner who doesn't maintain his property, there could be many different problems like leaky roof. You know, the roofs have to be maintained, and he doesn't maintain his AC or heater or certain things. Okay, so this deferred maintenance will decrease the lifespan and functionality of many of these components. And it says buyers should seek reliable advice from appropriate professionals and plan budget for maintenance and future repairs. Okay? Floors and walls. Amount and placement of seller's personal property may make a visual inspection of floors and walls difficult. You know, when you walk into a property, right? Sometimes when the property is either staged or the seller still lives there, you're going to have personal properties that may block certain walls. You know, I once had a case where the sofa actually blocked the back. The back of the sofa actually was leaning against the wall, as a result of which the inspector, including the agents, including the buyer, missed the existence of mold on the wall because the personal property was actually covering the mold. So it actually resulted in a lawsuit. Guess who won that lawsuit? Seller did. Well, unless the seller, unless the what do you call that? Unless the seller was aware of the mold and committed fraud. What if the seller also was not aware? It's possible the seller was not aware, though, right? I mean, if you want to win a lawsuit against the seller for fraud, you have to prove that the seller was aware of the mold. Now, if the buyer could not see it, it's just too bad, right? If the agents could not see it, agents has no liability, right? So this is just to warn the buyer that sometimes certain walls could be covered, okay, because of personal property, okay? The existence of certain types of floor coverings such as carpeting and rugs, some wall coverings such as wallpaper and paneling, and the presence of furniture may prevent buyers, inspectors, and brokers from fully inspecting condition of floors and walls. There's another advisory that tends to protect who? Actually protect the agents. So basically warning the buyer that sometimes this personal property may cover certain defect about the property, the real property, okay? All right, tempered glass. Many homes contain non-tempered glass in areas where tempered glass is required by building codes. Again, this is talking about old building, right? Where it's not built according to the building code, so there's no tempered glass. During buyer's inspection period, if any, buyer should have a contractor identify any glass that is not properly tempered. Buyers may want to replace any non-tempered glass with tempered glass to reduce the risk of injury. Well, having tempered glass and not having tempered glass means the risk of injury. If it's tempered, it doesn't break as easily, right? So it's safer.
What is tempered?
Tempered is specially treated. Yeah, especially heat treated, right? Or reinforced. Okay. All right, let's talk about this number 4 here. See, this PRDS form is very different from the standard zip form, the car advisory. It's got stuff that is not on the car advisory. We don't see this stuff on car advisory. Residential fireplace disclosure. Residential wood burning is the leading source of wintertime air pollution in the Bay Area, and studies have confirmed there are significant health effects from exposure to fine particulate matter found in wood smoke. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District established the Wood Smoke Rule, Regulation 6, Rule 3, to reduce wintertime smoke pollution and protect public health. The Wood Smoke Rule requires anyone selling, renting, or leasing property in the Bay Area to disclose the potential health hazards from air pollution caused from burning wood. Fine particulate matter, also known as PM 2.5, can travel deep into the respiratory system, bypass the lungs, and enter the blood system. Exposure may cause short-term and long-term health effects, including eye, nose, and throat irritation, reduced lung function, asthma, heart attacks, chronic bronchitis, cancer, and premature death. Exposure to fine particulates can worsen existing respiratory conditions. This one is just talking about, you know, people burning wood, right, during the winter months, and actually it has some health consequence. So anyone here use wood to keep warm? What do you use? Gas? Heater. Okay. I don't use firewood anymore. Solar panel leases. This is actually already on the car form. You know what solar leases? Sometimes when you're the listing agent, or even the selling agent, you know, some sellers forgot they actually leased the solar panel, and then just before close escrow, they realized that the solar panels were leased. Well, actually, you're lucky if you realize it before escrow close. Now, what if you're a seller? You sell your property, right? And you forgot that you had solar panels. You actually leased the solar panel, and you close escrow. Now we got a problem. And the solar company say, well, the lease has not expired. Can the solar company come after the seller or the buyer? Seller, because it's the seller who signed the contract. So if you're the listing agent, always check to see if there's any leased solar panels. Because if you have any leased solar panels, what do you need to do to the contract?
Transfer to a new buyer, only if they want to. That's why I just include.
This is how I normally handle it. All right, if I'm a seller, I have a solar panel that's leased. My preference would be to transfer the lease to the buyer. If I can't transfer the lease to the buyer, I don't want to sell to this buyer. So if you're a buyer, most of the time you have to agree to the transfer. And also it benefits you because you save electricity. If you can assume the lease of the solar panel, you can actually save electricity.
But actually, I would say either you buy it or not. At least not good.
Anyway, so that's
buyers do not want to transfer.
Most buyers would say yes. New construction warranties, defects, and lawsuits. Builders of new construction are required to provide certain warranties and information about how to report claims, but may not be required to complete the transfer disclosure statement. Did you know that if you buy a brand new home, the developer is not required to give you transfer disclosure statement? You know, under how many situations are transfer disclosure statements not required? New homes, probate sale, bank-owned property, okay, and trust sale. These type of transactions do not require transfer disclosure statement. Okay. Yeah, usually if your bank own property, they are not required to give you a transfer disclosure statement. You know what SB 800 is? I need to explain to you what SB 800 is. Now, let's say you buy a new home, and there is a defect on the property. Can you immediately go to the court to sue the developer? No. SB 800 requires that you go through a mediation process with the builder. You need to give the builder an opportunity to fix the problem before you can sue them. Okay, that's what SB 800 is about. Okay, that's it. Number 7. Number 7, we all know already. Square footage, number of rooms, and age, right? You know, can you sue a seller if the actual square footage is less than what was disclosed?
Yeah, yes. How do you prove?
You know, most of the time you cannot succeed, especially if it's only a small difference. If it's a big difference, it's a different story. Say, for example, you buy a home that has 2,000 square feet, and they misrepresented. They advertise as 2,200 square feet. You know, you try to sue for your damage, most of the time you start to get it. Because usually there's advisory telling you already. This type of advisory actually protects the seller. It also protects the agents. Okay?
So about how much can you sue them?
I don't know. There's no definite answer.
But the city record, they should present something with the city recorder.
Anyway, most of the time you can't, okay? You can't win on this type of lawsuit.
Okay.
Lot size and boundaries, same thing. You know, if it says here, only a land surveyor can reliably determine actual lot size, property corners, and the exact location of boundaries. Statements regarding these issues in the MLS advertisements, computer-generated property profiles, data and property tax, assessor records, or any disclosures are often approximations. You see that? So if it's advertised at 6,000 square feet lot size, and you actually end up with 5,700, no chance to sue. Okay? Most of the time, there's no chance to sue. Septic tanks and wastewater treatment system regulations. You know, this one talks about septic tank. Okay? It's only relevant if you have a septic tank system of the property. And this one talks about sewers and sewer laterals. Now, if you sell a property in Alameda County, chances are you have to comply with the sewer lateral requirements. Okay? Especially in Alameda County. I don't know about Santa Clara County, though. You guys know anything about sewer lateral in Santa Clara County? I don't think I ever heard about it in Santa Clara County. I think you said Alameda County. Now, if you don't know what the sewer lateral is about, this law was passed probably around 2012. When I was doing my radio show in the Bay Area back in 2012, a new law was passed, the sewer lateral. It was passed to protect the bay because if you don't have sewer lateral, it will cause contamination in the Bay Area. So they're trying to protect the bay. That's why they require every property owner before they can sell their property, they have to comply with the sewer lateral requirements. Okay? If you don't have one, you're going to have to install one. Water and well systems, I'm going to skip that. Okay? Basically, it's talking about property may be served by a well, spring, public, or private water systems, or a combination there, in which case buyers should consider requesting that sellers complete the PRDS well and private water system checklist. Well may contain bacteria, chemical, metals, minerals, and may emit odors. So this is about well. Recent studies have revealed that some wells in Morgan Hill and San Martin contain the chemical fluorate. Other wells in the Santa Clara County may be contaminated by this or other chemicals. So this is an advisory to the buyer that if they buy certain properties that have wells, they need to be aware that some of these wells are contaminated. Okay. So if they want to know more information, they just go to the website or call up a phone number to get more information. Okay. Water shortages and conservation, water conservation, plumbing fixtures. This one is talking about the non-compliant plumbing fixtures shall be replaced with water conserving plumbing fixtures. There's a law that actually requires that. So this is to let the buyer know that, you know, there's such a requirement. All single-family residents, if an alteration or improvement is undertaken for which a permit is required, compliance is a precondition of final permit approval. So after January 1st, 2017, all single-family residents built before 1994 must be brought into compliance whether or not the property is being altered or repaired. So basically, they want everybody to have water conserving fixtures to save water because of the drought that we have in California. Okay, commercial, the law kicks into effect in 2019, but the residential is already in effect. Wet weather conditions. Not much to talk about on this one. Water intrusion. It says here the cost of repairing and remediating water intrusion damage and its causes can be significant. The existence and cause of water intrusion is often difficult to detect. An absence of visual evidence of water intrusion does not mean that such intrusion does not exist. Basically telling an average buyer that, you know, in any home, okay, especially the old one, there may be water intrusion that the agents cannot see or the seller might not be aware. So it is up to the buyer to hire the right professional to check for this type of problems. Okay, but I think an average home inspector would not do this type of checking. Groundwater, natural springs, and water runoff. You know, just to warn the buyer that there are properties that have natural springs and rainwater runoff issues that may result in standing water, dry rot, flooding, mold, foundation failure, or other potential water damage to improvements. Frankly, all of this advisory, they are putting, it's a CYA thing, okay, for the agents, all right? Cover the agent. Creeks and culverts, same thing. Maybe if a property is close to creek or culvert, it is prone to what? Flooding. So this is kind of like to warn the buyer that if they have a property that is close to culvert or creek or ditch, you know, there might be a flooding concern, so they need to get flood insurance. Levees, we don't worry about that. Pests, destroying pests and organisms, we're talking about what? Termites. Okay. These days in residential purchase, does the standard car agreement require the seller to provide termite report? No. Standard car agreement, purchase agreement, does not require the seller to provide termite report. So if the buyer wants to get termite done, the buyer have to take care of that themselves. Okay. Pet animals or pests. This one is talking about, you know what, in some properties where they have pets in the past, what do you worry about when there was a pet on the property before? The urine from the pets. You know, when you have pets on the property, sometimes you don't smell the urine during the winter months, but come summer, the smell is really bad. So always be aware whenever there were pets on the property. You know, there's always that risk that the pet smell, the urine smell, may require a lot of efforts to remove them. Okay, just be aware of something like that. Endangered Species Act, we don't worry about it unless you are buying a vacant land. Okay. You know what Endangered Species Act means? It means that there are certain types of animals or insects that are being protected because they are becoming extinct. Extinct means what? It will no longer be around. That's what extinct means. So there are laws that protect this endangered species. Power lines and power plants. So this is basically to educate the buyer that there are power lines, and basically to warn the buyer these power lines may affect the value, development, use, and enjoyment of the property. Okay, so just an advisory thing. Whether the buyer really cares, it's up to them, but they've been advised. Okay, underground utilities and pipe. Underground utilities and pipes. Some communities have begun the process of relocating utility lines underground in order to remove the utility poles in the neighborhood. These projects can result in special tax assessment, increased costs for homeowners, and temporary disruptions of the neighborhood. Water, natural gas, and other types of fuels are delivered to communities through a network of underground pipes that are connected to a residential and commercial properties. Some areas have been adversely impacted by disruptions in service or damage to those underground pipes. Just another advisory thing. Usually it doesn't happen, so we don't worry about it. Soils and geologic conditions. This is nothing new. You know, what can you tell the buyer? Not much, other than the fact that houses are built on soils, right? And underneath the house, usually it's made up of either rocks or soils, and these materials could actually cause the building to settle. Okay, so just another advisory. Easements, encroachment, public trails, access rights, private rights, and maintenance agreement. Another education thing. They once buy about easements. Okay. Views and view ordinances. You know, views are not protected in California. Did you know that? No protection. So when you buy the house, there's nice view, right? A few years later, you could lose that view. Okay? There's no protection of views in California. Okay? Unless the CC&R actually restricted. There are some CC&Rs that actually don't allow the homeowner to grow their trees beyond a certain height. Now, if it's stated in the CC&R, then your view may be protected. Now, let's say, for example, you bought this home, it has got view, right? And then a couple of years later, the neighbor in front of you has got a tree that grew up to a very tall height, and then one day it blocks your view, right? And then you look into the CC&R, CC&R limits to certain height, and if it's beyond certain height, you can actually enforce it and require the homeowner in front of you to trim the tree so you can protect your view. But that is only if the CC&R says that, though. Not every CC&R actually gives you the protection for the views. Okay.
People also get CC&R when they are in a condo or?
Not necessarily. Some communities have CC&R, even though you are not a condominium. They call it the deed restriction, actually. Deed restriction, okay? Tree ordinances, we already know, right? You know, there's street tree disclosure. I have not covered street tree disclosure yet, but in San Jose, you have to make certain disclosure about street trees. There are certain laws that require trees along the street. So the seller has to state whether the seller has complied with the street tree ordinance or not. You know what it says here? Several municipalities have enacted ordinances to regulate and control the removal of trees. They don't allow people to remove trees in San Jose. Some cities have identified heritage or other significant trees that must be protected or preserved in certain areas. Permits may be required to cut down, destroy, remove, or relocate the designated trees. You know that not just in the Bay Area, though. If you go down to Southern California, you go to places where they have a large lot, they have the old oak tree. You can't simply cut the old oak tree. They are protected. In order to cut the old oak tree, you need a permit from the city. Okay? Something to keep in mind of. All right, and then it says buyers should read applicable tree preservation ordinances, check with relevant government entities, and consult with an arborist during the inspection period, if any, to determine the health of trees and whether or not any special action can or must be taken with respect to any trees on the property. City of San Jose, for example, requires sellers to make specific disclosures to buyers regarding street trees on a separate form prior to the sale of residential property. We already know this. If you ever sold a property in San Jose, there's a separate disclosure for street trees. Okay? If property is in the city of San Jose, buyers should not close escrow without receiving the seller's street tree disclosure form. It's just a disclosure form, a one-page disclosure form. Okay? Land lease, you guys have not come across land lease yet. Land lease, you know, sometimes when you buy a piece of property, you think you're buying the land, but you're not. Because you may be buying a lease, so just be aware of that. Okay, you buy a land, that's fee simple, right? If you buy a lease, there's no fee simple. It could expire sometime. Right? Building permit, zoning, and code compliance. This one basically warned the buyer about some construction may not be permitted. That's all. Future repairs, replacements, and remodels. It says here, various federal, state, and local government agencies impose limitations and restrictions regarding house size, configuration, design, construction, and landscaping materials, and development of real property, depending upon the general location of the property. For example, if it is in the coastal zone, abuts waterways, or in a designated watershed area or environmental protection area. You know, some places, the government code usually, I mean the city code or some code simply does not allow you to build a house that is bigger than a certain size. Okay, so this is to warn the buyer that there may be such restriction on future construction. Smoke alarms and carbon monoxide devices. Remember, when you sell a property, it is the seller's responsibility to make sure proper smoke alarms are installed and carbon monoxide devices are installed. Okay. Retrofit safety and security requirements. You know, when you fill out the car form, there are actually conditions that talks about who's going to pay for any retrofit. Usually, we make the seller pay for it. Okay. Retrofit means that maybe it's not safe. The government may go back and say, we want you to make it safe. That's what retrofit means. Yeah. Okay. Rekeying, this is to warn the buyer that, you know, the seller may give you a set of keys. You are advised to change the lock. Okay. And online photos and information. This is to warn the buyer that the online photos are for marketing purposes. Whatever that you see online may not reflect what the property actually looks like. Okay. Usually you can do Photoshop on it, right? Yeah. You know, I've been fortunate though. The ones that I took for Sunnyvale in Berkeley, they turned out to be very pretty photos. Okay. Yeah, $99. It's pretty good. Okay. EPA requirements for pre-1978 housing. Okay. So it says here the EPA required contractors be certified before performing work in homes built before 1978. This one is about lead work. Okay. So if you're going to be, you know, pre-1978, paint actually contained lead, right? Mm-hmm. After 1978, they don't allow lead in paint. So if you need to hire a contractor to do a lead work or remove lead, the EPA requires that the contractor be certified. Okay. Yeah. Historical designation, coastal commission, and other restrictions on improvements and land use. You know, there are some buildings that have historical significance. Now, if it's one of those historical buildings, then you cannot change the architecture, okay? Or you cannot even demolish it. Rental property. Oh, you know what? Recently there was a news on bugs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. A family actually sued the hotel because there was bugs on the property and got $540,000. That's right. Now there's a law. Now there's a law that's effective July 1st, 2017, right? Landlords must provide a statutory bed bug notice to new tenants and must comply with any other state regulations to eradicate bed bugs. This is a brand new law. So you got a new tenant that just come in, right? Mm-hmm. And right now we're after July 1st. So you are supposed to warn the tenant if there are bugs on the property, okay? In the future. Well, would you rather give the disclosure or not give the disclosure?
The disclosure is mandatory.
The rental, yeah.
Rental, right?
Yeah, rental.
Is there a standard form for that? No, this is July 1st though, so very recent. Have you seen a car form for the disclosure?
Yeah.
There is a car form? Yeah. That's a disclosure on bed bugs, right? Okay, but anyway, so fortunate for you guys, the car form actually has the disclosure, right? Okay, good. Okay. Mellow rules, we already know about mellow rules. We're not going to talk about that. Supplemental property tax, there's nothing new. PACE is the same as car. You know what PACE is about? Sometimes, people borrow money to improve their property under the PACE program. PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. Now, if people borrow money to conserve energy and water, to make certain improvements that help them conserve energy and water, they can actually get a loan from the government. If they borrow money for the improvement, there will be actually a lien against the property. So something for the buyer to be aware of, because and this lien actually stays with the property now. So if you are the buyer, it says here actually, through PACE, property owners may finance such projects as adding insulation or installing more energy efficient furnaces, drought-tolerant landscaping, etc. Buyers and sellers are cautioned that these finance bonds become a line item obligation on future property tax bills. So something for your buyer to be aware of if there's any pays liens. And are usually not listed on prelim. Worst thing is that it's not listed on the prelim title report. So if you read the title report, you don't even know it exists. But if that's the case, how are you going to find out though? Well, and then it's also say that some lenders may not allow PACE financing because it affects their security interest. Buyers and sellers are advised to consult with qualified tax, financial, legal advisors concerning the ramifications of an existing PACE loan and applying for a PACE loan. Sellers should disclose the non-existence of and any other information regarding PACE financing relating to the property. You know, because the PACE lien actually becomes like a tax on the property, if you're a buyer, you're actually paying an extra tax. But if you're the seller, you are required to disclose. If you have a PACE lien, you're required to disclose it though. Okay? Up top, California withholding, that one is nothing new. Debt on the property, nothing new. TDS, nothing new. Natural hazard disclosure, nothing new. Geologic hazards, earthquake fault zones and seismic hazard zone, nothing new. Fire hazard, same old, same old. Environmental hazard, same old, same thing. Underground storage tank, same. Government services. Basically, this is to warn the buyer that there may not be any certain governmental services in some area. Okay? And the buyer should investigate this. Schools. Yeah, this is basically to warn the buyer that they may decide to buy a property because of good school district, but then they may not have enough space available for upcoming school years. So even if they buy this property, they may have to wait before their kid can go to school over there. Okay. Noise and odors. The most common one, of course, is the BART. Right? If a property is close to BART, of course you're going to have noise problem. And freeway too. I got one. I sold one that had a freeway noise, but I'm taken care of through the advisory. Okay. So in case you forgot to disclose, it's right there. See in the advisory. Okay. Smoking ordinances. The counties of San Clara and San Mateo has, as well as some cities in those counties have, or are in the process of enacting smoking ordinances regulating smoking pollution from a variety of tobacco and non-tobacco devices within some types of residential property. This regulation may limit or affect where smoking is permitted. Okay, the smoker's responsibilities on secondhand smoke and other issues. Marijuana and drug labs. It says here, although California law now permits some cultivation, possession, and use of marijuana, federal law recognizes no lawful use for marijuana, and legal and federal criminal penalties regarding marijuana remain in effect. So even though state law legalized growth of marijuana, federal law does not. So basically, just to warn the buyer, that's the situation here. Okay. Crime, we'll skip that. Wire fraud, scam, skip that. Freeway, highway, street, skip that. Trains and BART. Just to warn people about the noise. High-speed rail, I guess about the noise also. Okay. Insurance. Certain requirements about the insurance. Oh, you know what? You guys heard about the California Fair Plan? In some hillside area, no insurance will cover. Only California Fair Plan. Okay? Something for you to know. Insurance? Some areas, hillside. Many insurance companies will not insure. So you have to go with the California Fair Plan. Okay? But one thing you have to know about California Fair Plan, there may be some things that are not covered that would be covered in regular insurance. Things like if you have a water pipe that breaks, water pipe sudden burst, it's not covered under California Fair Plan, but it's covered under the usual property insurance. Okay, something for you to know. All right. So, but sometimes the buyer don't have a choice because if the insurance company would not insure, you have to go with the California Fair Plan. Title insurance. We won't cover that. Home warranty, common interest development. It's all covered in private transfer fee. I haven't come across for a property by the, or maybe once or twice, private transfer fee. This is actually imposed by the CC&R. It's not by the government. Non-confidentiality of offers. This is to warn the buyer that sellers are not required to keep the buyer's offers confidential. Okay. Liquidated damages. You know what? You guys got to be careful about liquidated damages. Whenever you have a liquidated damages clause, it requires the buyer's signature and the seller's signature, or else it's not valid. If you don't remember what a liquidated damages clause is, if I'm a seller, the buyer put down $20,000 as a deposit, and the buyer breached the contract, and if I have a liquidated damage clause, do I need to prove my damage, or I can just sue for the $20,000? I can just sue for the $20,000, right? Now, let's say, for example, I enter into a contract with a buyer for $650,000, and the deposit is 3%, which is about $20,000, right? And then the buyer breached the contract, and after the buyer breached the contract, I sold the property for $700,000. Okay, and if I don't have a valid liquidated damage, can I sue the buyer for the $20,000 or not? If I don't have a valid liquidated damage, I cannot sue the buyer because I actually make money. After he breached the contract, I made $50,000 extra, so I don't have any loss. Whereas if I have a liquidated damage clause, I can keep the $50,000 gain, and I can still keep the buyer's $20,000. That's why you need to have a valid liquidated damage clause.
So if you have this, you can keep the 20,000.
That's right. You can make the extra 50,000, and you can still keep the 20,000. But if you don't have the liquidated damage clause, because you actually make money, you did not lose money. That's why you cannot keep the 20,000. Okay. All right, mediation, arbitration, no need to talk about that, legal action. Regional issue, okay, this is actually more related to the two counties, okay. I'm just going to pick and choose since we ran out of time, okay. Pick and choose the one that I think might be important. 3R report. Last time we did the Daly City listing, we didn't do the 3R report before listing, right? It would have been better if we had done the 3R report before we put it on the market, right? Because if you're in Daly City, you're trying to sell a property there, you actually required to get a 3R report. So what's a 3R report? A 3R report is a report on the construction of the property, okay? And basically, it is something that the seller have to pay for. Hey, Leo, how much did our seller pay? $150? That's right. Pay $150 and get the 3R report. Okay. 3R report is something that is required to close escrow in Daly City. Half Moon Bay, Hillsborough. Okay. You know, if you're selling a property in Hillsborough, they say the Hillsborough Municipal Court requires the issuance of a permit for possession and use of home alarm systems. These permits cannot be assigned to the buyer as part of the sale. Buyers who are acquiring the property in Hillsborough, which is already equipped with a home alarm system, or who intend to install a home alarm system, must secure a new permit. So if you're selling a property or buying a property in Hillsborough, always be aware of the home alarm system because that requires a permit, and you need to get a permit. Okay. Millbrae fire sprinkler and illuminated address number ordinances. So Millbrae, they require that the fire sprinkler must be installed in the garage. So in Millbrae, if you own a property, you have to install fire sprinkler in the garage. Okay. However, this requirement is only triggered when any addition, alteration, repair of the structure or building where the cost exceeds $1,000. Okay. So if you're applying for a permit, if the cost exceeds $1,000 and it's a building permit, so even if you apply for building permit, they want you to install sprinklers in the garage if your cost of improvement is $1,000 or more. Okay. All right. Portola Valley residential data report. This one I'll skip. San Mateo City supplemental flood zone disclosure. If you're selling property in San Mateo County, you need to be aware that buyer is advised to investigate the issue with the city of San Mateo. A third-party provider natural hazard disclosures statements and their own insurance will determine the possible ramifications of expanding a flood designation to the value, use, and enjoyment of the property. To be honest with you, I don't know about this requirement, so this is new to me. Santa Clara, Morgan Hill, Los Altos, Saratoga, Sunnyvale. It's all advisory stuff, okay? Some of which we don't even care. All right, so this is actually a very interesting advisory form in PRDS that we do not get on car form. So it's very local, and it's actually very helpful to the buyer. So that's why some agents in the Santa Clara or San Mateo area, they actually prefer to use PRDS forms, okay? Because it's actually more thorough instead of this in terms of disclosure.
So just say if you're an agent, and then you just kind of figure out what problem is more important to the buyer or seller, and then you just copy and send it to them.
No, you just give them the entire disclosure. Yeah, the advisory. You know, it's up to them whether they want to. You want to investigate further. Your job is just to provide the advisory.
That's this whole thing.
That's right, and your job is not to explain it. Although, you know, I think certain things are more important that you should explain. Okay, like for example, the 3R report. You have to explain, you know, to the seller that you need to get the 3R report. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you all for attending, and see you guys next week. Next week we'll